Yes, Saudi Arabian Grand Prix coming up this weekend. It's can you believe it, the fifth time we've come to Saudi Arabia since its debut back in 2021. The third longest circuit on the calendar, and it's identified as the fastest street circuit in F1. 27 corners, a lot of them medium and high speed, and you have 3 consecutive DRS zones here with the best chance of overtaking probably into turn 1. Now, Max Verstappen won this race last year, and he's won 2 of the 4 races we've had at this track so far. But if we're looking at who's the favourites going into this weekend, you'd have to point out McLaren. They've won all but 1 regular race so far this year. So I guess, Sam, we're going away from the question of whether McLaren are favourites, because I think that's quite a simple yes, full stop. But should they be expecting to go into this weekend as a massive favourite where they could be winning this race by an absolute landslide? Or can the other teams keep it close? What do you think?
I think, unfortunately, form will continue. I know we spoke about being positive, and Harry immediately kicked the door into the world of negativity. I'm going to walk through that door with him. Unfortunately, I think this track suits the characteristics of that McLaren down to an absolute T. They like this kind of smoother track. They love the high-speed corners. They've got great straight-line speed. They're brilliant with their tyre wear, so that shouldn't be an issue around here as well. I think if they can break that DRS in that first lap, whichever McLaren it is at the front will scamper on off. And I wouldn't be surprised, actually, if the gap that we had at Bahrain, which ended up being 15 seconds after a safety car midway through the race, is maybe dwarfed a little by the gap that we can see here at the Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, which I think could be even larger. It's going to be very much up to the likes of George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen to see if they could do anything, if they can pull anything out of their cars to disrupt, disturb, and frustrate McLaren into maybe having a bit of a strategy blunder, not having a smooth Grand Prix, or just stopping the flow that one of those drivers could easily get into if they're allowed into clean air. So this is going to be a really tough track to unsettle McLaren, I think. It's not impossible. It could happen. We've seen them have some issues in qualifying, and that's where they appear to be weak. They can't seem to nail a proper 1-2 comfortably. They do seem to kind of fluff their lines a little under pressure. If that happens again, if they're able to get in front and maybe 2 drivers can work together, perhaps Antonelli and a Russell, then there is a chance that they could be disturbed. But unfortunately, if one of them gets away cleanly, I do think this is going to be a real struggle to claw them back.
Puts a lot of emphasis on qualifying as well.
It's been the case the whole way through the season, right? Every time we've had a pole sitter, they've gone on to win the race. It really is crucial that you need to get out in front. And that's where someone like Lewis Hamilton has been struggling. Whilst his race pace has been fairly all right against his teammate, the moment he was at the front for the Sprint Grand Prix, he won. Every other time he's qualified behind his teammate. You got to get on with it, sunshine, otherwise you're not going to be at the front.
Difficult track to overtake on, so it means the likes of Lando Norris, who didn't have a great qualifying session at Bahrain and was relatively punished for it, although not completely. You feel like his margin for error is even smaller here because, again, if you're not making moves into turn 1, it's difficult to make overtakes on this track. Harry, do you think McLaren go into this weekend as massive favourites, marginal favourites? Where do you think this might head up?
I would say they're about, for me, they're about the same as they were going into Bahrain. That being favourites. I don't think they're going to be massively any quicker here. But yeah, I think they're still. You've got to say that they're going to be the favourites going into this one. There's a possibility of error. Both drivers have had mistakes this year. Norris with a few of them in the just the last race alone, and Piastri made one or two in Australia in the opening round. So the margin for error here is pretty small. You have an error here, and you often or not you're in the wall. So it's not to say they're going to just run away with it. I think you're right on qualifying being very important. Because overtaking is difficult, which is quite weird given that it's such a high speed track. It's really only turn 1 where you can make a proper overtake. But yeah, so I'm not calling it over already. I think there's still possibilities for this not to go McLaren's way. Bahrain, for example, I know Piastri had it under control, but there are factors that can be thrown in. There's a safety car, which is a high possibility here in Saudi, could well throw things off kilter, and we've seen how McLaren can be fast but silly in previous races. So I think they're the favourites, but I'm not going to call it over yet.
Yeah, there will be a lot of hope up and down the grid that fast and silly mentality returns here, because they be looking quick based on what they were able to do at Bahrain. The short answer to my own question is they should be comfortable favourites again. And honestly, my review of McLaren over the last couple of races in particular is that the car has reached a point where it is so strong that they can just quite easily and effectively tailor the car to the circuit that they're going to. So if we go back to the first part of this triple header, which was Japan, they were faster than everyone in the high-speed corners. And it made a lot of sense to prepare your car that way, because all of Sector 1, the Degners, Spoon Curve, like there's a lot of high-speed corners at that circuit. And they were compromised a little bit in the low-speed corners compared to Red Bull. And ultimately, what Verstappen was able to do in qualifying and the sort of race that unfolded, Verstappen and Red Bull did a great job of capitalizing on that. But I have really little doubt that if it was Norris or Piastri that claimed pole in that Grand Prix, they would have been able to use that high-speed advantage to sail away from everyone else. So there was, going into Bahrain, maybe a little bit of optimism for Red Bull that we've just come from a circuit where you've been very good in low-speed corners and there's more of them at Bahrain. But what actually happened was McLaren completely changed the focus of their car. They realized Bahrain, you don't need to be as quick in the high-speed corners. And they were just much faster than pretty much every other team in the low and medium-speed corners. The only team that was able to live with them in those low-speed corners was Red Bull. But the difference between a great and a good and a great car is that Red Bull were good in the low-speed corners, but that compromised them everywhere else. With McLaren, it didn't. They were great in low-speed corners, but they weren't suffering on the straights. They weren't suffering in the high-speed corners. So some might think going into this race, based on what we've seen, well, the high-speed corners, it was fairly even at Bahrain. But I just think McLaren will go back to what they did at Suzuka, even though they didn't win that race, and effectively set this car up to be faster than everyone else. They just have that advantage right now. Harry, who is in the best position to challenge McLaren? Because we've seen in this relatively young season that Ferrari have won a sprint. We've had Verstappen win a Grand Prix. We've had George Russell be the next fastest car on 2 different occasions. So the order between second and fourth seems to be fluctuating quite a bit. Which team or driver might be in the best position here?
I think it could well be Russell. Ferrari, I'm just going to sort of, they'll be there or thereabouts, but I think until maybe just pray. I think maybe until Miami, they may not be in this properly. I'm not ruling them out entirely, but I just think as a closest competitor, I think Russell could well be the one to challenge the McLarens here. Verstappen will give it all he can, but we saw in Bahrain that car is a struggle to drive. And I just think, I think Russell and Mercedes, that package is, as you said, Ben, after the Bahrain GP, they'll be mightily encouraged that it worked in hot conditions, which it didn't like doing last year. So Saudi also relatively warm. Yes. So I think they'll be encouraged by that in terms of tyre wear, and they've got a solid package underneath them, which they've not had since 2021. Maybe last time they had a car that was this reliable in terms of performance. So I'll say it's going to be Russell. I think Ferrari will be in the mix. I think Verstappen will be in the mix, but the nearest competitor I think will be the burglar himself.
Does this feel like a burglar sort of Grand Prix, Sam, or would you pick another team and another driver?
I would pick McLaren as the biggest threat to McLaren.
Nice. Oh man, McLaren's got hands.
Oh, damn. I've got hands. Me's really got me on the ropes, McLaren is saying. I mean that seriously. I know it's a funny statement to make, but I do mean that seriously. I think they are the biggest threat to hampering their own success because they're tiptoe around themselves too much. They play too nicey. They're not willing to make a cutthroat decision and get on with it and get down the road. And it helped in Bahrain that their drivers were so heavily separated. But the moment Norris and Piastri get too close together, don't want to upset him. I don't want to upset them. I don't, we can't overtake. We can't race. That round says we can race, but actually let's just stay in hold with it. And they make too many decisions and they talk too much and they don't race enough. And I think that it's going to come back to bite them. The more that the teams around them grow into the season, become more comfortable, I think we're right to say that Ferrari haven't had the brightest start to a season, but maybe come Saudi, maybe definitely come Miami, they'll start to settle into this. George Russell is growing in confidence. He's seemingly getting better and better with every race. Points will start to be taken off you. You saw how good Charles Leclerc was. And I think if the safety car didn't come out of Bahrain, he might have been a bigger threat to McLaren than McLaren thought he was going to be. I genuinely think that they need to be more aware of the dangers around them. And I mentioned those names, Verstappen, Russell, and Leclerc, because they're big qualifiers. And that allows them to be in the mix with Russell and Norris. Piastri and Norris. And that means that from the start, they could be there. Hamilton on pace could be there, The difference is, Hamilton has said himself that his qualifying hasn't been good enough all season, and he's right to identify that. It hasn't been for a while, and therefore he isn't able to compete with your Norrises and your Piastris off the get-go. They're already halfway down the road by the time that he's actually overtaken someone that's around him. Unfortunately, Leclerc can stick it on the front row. Verstappen can stick it on pole position. George Russell will be right there waiting for you, and they will be the three drivers that will cause problems for McLaren if McLaren don't want to deal with it themselves. The flip side of those things are, will those three drivers cannibalize the points they can make by constantly taking from each other and not actually letting one of them be the key challenger towards McLaren? But I realistically think the three competitors behind Ferrari, Mercedes, and Red Bull are so close and track dependent, it could be any of them that get a great qualifying performance.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we've seen so far. It has been very close. If I was pushed to pick a driver and a team, it would be Russell and Mercedes based on what we saw at Bahrain. And for the same reasons that you mentioned, Harry, that Mercedes does seem like a well-rounded car. It seems to go okay pretty much everywhere we've gone so far. The only thing that they struggle on a little bit is low-speed corners. Don't really have many of them here at Saudi Arabia. Turn one. Maybe
the last corner as well is a bit slow.
Yeah, even that might be pushing a medium speed corner, but yeah, it's certainly one of the slower ones. So yeah, I think that will suit the car. And as Harry mentioned, we were a bit worried going into this season that Mercedes might continue to struggle at these tracks where the temperature's warmer. We will see that again at Saudi Arabia, but they passed the test in Bahrain. Similar to Bahrain, where that was race one of last season, so it was earlier on in the season. Same thing with Saudi Arabia. We're going there later in the year than what we have done the last couple of years. And as a result of that, it is going to be warmer than what we had in 2024, when I was looking in terms of, we're looking like low 30s degrees Celsius. So it is going to be warm, even though it is a night race. But hey, I mean, they proved in Bahrain that they could deal with high temperatures. They could deal with tire wear, because again, I think that's going to be more of an issue this year than it was last year. Last year, it was a very basic one-stop strategy, but there was an early safety car. I think it was like lap 7 or something like that. Everyone came into the pits, bar a couple of drivers, and they all went to the end relatively comfortably. But Pirelli are bringing softer tyres this year than they did last year. It's the first time this year that Pirelli have changed the compounds that they're bringing to a race. So based on that, based on it being hotter, maybe we do start to see some struggles with tyre wear. And Mercedes proved last time out that it wasn't as much of an issue as it could have been for them. So I'll say them. I'll go with them as the potential spoilers to McLaren's party. At the top of the championship, Sam, we've got Norris and Piastri separated by just 3 points. And of course, after this Grand Prix, the end of a triple header, we have a couple of weeks before we go to Miami. Based on that time difference between this race and the next race, how important would it be for each of them to claim that championship lead?
Usually, I would say both drivers will take a big motivational boost by going into a mini break, like a couple of week break, being ahead of the championship. But I genuinely think that Piastri and Norris are so mentally different in the way that they prepare themselves for Grand Prix. I think Piastri is almost like Kimi Räikkönen in the sense that he's just not phased in the cockpit. You hear his responses when he wings. You hear the responses when he goes off the track. You even hear the responses when he makes a mess of things in the bloody press conference when he knocks over his drink. Of course, the scene. It's just like nothing bothers this chap. He's so well put together. And so he's been trailing since race 1 when we had that incident in Australia. It hasn't bothered him. His performances have been exceptional the whole way through the season. Other than that one proper mistake, I think it would not bother him to go into the break 5 points behind Lando Norris if he sits second. I think he'll go into it and go, that's nothing. That's a race win down a second place. I'll turn that around in one Grand Prix. Lando Norris, I think, is very much a form driver. I think he's very much I need it to be going my way to make sure that I'm running the right way. He came into the Bahrain Grand Prix, I think, angry. I think he was frustrated about the qualifying where he qualified P6. You saw from his start, he made the mistake of not being in his grid box, but proper went for it. Got up to P3 almost immediately. And he threw the car around a bit in Bahrain. And whilst he moved up the grid, it wasn't perfect. So I think he was driving with anger, whereas I think Lando Norris drives really well in a happy place. So I think if he goes into that break leading, if he beats Piastri at Saudi, I think he will really run with that. I think that will really benefit him. I think that will buoy his mood and his performances. And I think he will be someone who benefits massively more than someone like Piastri being the championship leader and going into a break, having been more successful than their championship rival.
Harry, given there are just 3 points separating these two drivers, it's incredibly likely whoever finishes ahead in this race is going to be the driver that's leading the championship before we get to Miami. How important would it be for both of them?
Yeah, I'm with Sam. I think they are wired slightly differently. I think for Piastri, nothing really seems to, at least externally, nothing seems to really faze him. He's just going about his business and, oh, look, I'm not really, going to have a championship lead. Norris, I know he says that he doesn't care about it, but I think mentally he does need a bounce back and to have that championship lead. Look, we're so early into the season, but a lot of it is mental resilience, and sometimes it can just take a couple of knock backwards. And your championship hopes are not looking great, and you've got to really, really bounce back from it. So look, Norris has hardly had a huge loss here, but I think will be more important to him to be leading this one out of the back of Saudi than it will be for Piastri. But it's a tough one, and it's so early. That's the thing with these long F1 seasons now. When you're in a battle, the actual resilience you have to keep going for that amount of time. I mean, look at Nico Rosberg, for example. He didn't have a 24 race season, but the man was exhausted by the time he finished his championship year that he retired. It's a lot for them. And I get why Norris is saying things like, I'm not thinking about it now, because it's probably the easier thing to do, because it could just completely weigh down. But yeah, I think it's probably more important to Norris coming out of the back of Saudi, but I suspect both of them will pretend that a championship isn't a thing.
Well, I don't know if you saw Norris's reaction to the Grand Prix. He was interviewed by Lawrence Barretto for F1, and he was like, it was a very downbeat interview after his podium, and he said something along the lines of, people are telling me that I'm still leading the championship, but I don't know how. Whether he didn't actually know he was leading the championship or not remains to be seen. But it was very much a case of, I'm not driving well enough to be here, but I am. I think with Lando Norris, I don't think it matters too much whether he's leading the championship after this race, because I think he needs something of a mental reset regardless. If he wins, even if he wins and he has a great race, there have still been a few things that he'll want to reflect on in this first part of the season that need to happen if he's first or second, or even worse than second, potentially, if Verstappen or Russell are involved. For Piastri, I know he seems quite unfazed. It could be a real confidence boost if he's leading the championship after this race, because if he can say after 5 races, I'm the one that's made the big mistake, which was Australia. That mistake cost Piastri likely 16 points. If he can say, I was the one of the two of us that had the issue, and I'm also the one leading the championship, that's a good sign. And I think that would be quite a boost of confidence for him. But I think in both instances, Harry, what you said was right. It's such a long season that you can't get too caught up in the championship battle at this point of the year, or you are going to burn out by the time we get to Belgium. And look, back to last year, right? 4 or 5 races into last season, what was the championship battle situation? There wasn't one. It was Verstappen's going to win this by 3 years. And in the end, he won by 6 months. So I know he still ended up winning the title, but what F1 looked like after 5 races of 2024 is not what it looked like after 24 races. So, they do need to pace themselves. Not a great weekend for Red Bull, the Bahrain Grand Prix. Just the second time since the start of 2021 that both cars finished and neither was in the top 5. There were rumors of a meeting between senior personnel after the race, including Christian Horner and Helmut Marko. I believe Ted Kravitz reported that Max Verstappen's manager gave Helmut Marko a bit of an earful after the race as well. Helmut Marko was talking to media as well. He said, we have to get, as soon as possible, performance in the car again. And also standards like a pit stop has to work. If the car is not the fastest and then the pit stops are not working, that is not acceptable. We were just slow. And Christian Horner, also speaking after the race, said that Red Bull were dealing with 2 issues across the weekend, a braking issue and an imbalance issue, although he did say that Red Bull were hopeful of bringing new parts to the car as soon as possible to address those issues. We're only 1 week, of course, off of a race win from Verstappen at Suzuka, Sam, but how worried are you, or how worried should they be about the situation they find themselves in?
I'm not. Japan is so balance heavy, and Verstappen won that. His pole lap was one of the best laps I've ever seen in Formula One. There was a week between those two. I think Bahrain's the outlier. I think Saudi is far closer to a Suzuka-style track in terms of its flowing corners, its lack of heavy braking zones. We've already mentioned how few slow corners are on the racetrack. Turn 1 is pretty much the slowest. Turn 4/3, that quick left-hander, is also a bit of a heavy brake, kind of slow zone, but it's not really huge. I think here that, count Max Verstappen out at your peril. That man is a sensational racing driver, pretty good at the old F1. He won a race ago. That is it. People in Formula One do sometimes have quite short-term memory, and there's a lot of recency bias. I do think that this race in Bahrain was a gigantic outlier. You remember last year where he had Hungary? He was screaming and moaning in the car. He hit Lewis Hamilton into turn 1. He had issues throughout the whole race. We get to Belgium next time. He beats Lando Norris. He's having a great scrap with the Ferraris right there. The Mercedes had an outlier race where they were much faster than everyone else, right? He beat both of the McLarens, other than Piastri, sorry. He beat Norris. I just seriously think that this is going to be the exception. Come Saudi, I think Verstappen's back on it. I think Verstappen's going to be fighting right back there again for the podium. I think he's going to be a nuisance for the likes of Russell, who might think he's the next biggest threat to McLaren. I think he might have a good chance of beating the Ferraris. That Red Bull isn't going to be as fast as the McLaren, but I do think he's going to be a pain in their backside. So, I think whilst parts are going to help and the Red Bull does need improving, Max Verstappen is that good. They're working out. I genuinely think he's going to be there for the fight again for podiums the moment we get to Saudi. I'm really not worried. I just hope that Yuki Tsunoda can get another good race under his belt, take another step forward and be a part of that, top 7, top 8 battle and score some really solid points.
Do you think there's any concern? Because I agree with what you said, by the way, that Suzuka and Jeddah are far more similar than, say, Bahrain and Jeddah. Is there any concern that if they don't struggle this weekend, actually they might still struggle somewhere else that we get to that is similar to Bahrain, and this race might not actually confirm or deny whether Bahrain's an outlier?
No, you're 100% correct to think that. If their issue is balance under braking and those two issues are more connected than we expect, let's say they don't sort that issue out and we get to a track such as Monza, which is pure straight line and heavy braking. There are 5 or 6 racetracks around this calendar which have a lot of incredibly heavy brake zones, and they will come under fire there. You look at Spa being one of them, right? Imagine going through braking to the last corner, heavy brake zone. You're going to lose a lot of time there, a very important part of the racetrack. It means you won't be able to overtake clearly. You might get overtaken easily. It will come to affect them. So they did clearly have an issue, but I think that issue is less likely to affect them than it is for them to have a bad race rather than having a good race at tracks that do suit their car, if that makes sense.
Harry, how worried do you think Red Bull should be?
I think they will be very concerned going into this one. I agree with what Sam's saying. This is not anything like Bahrain. And if it is an issue under braking, then you need to brake a lot of Saudi. So Kimi Antonelli is going to win. But they're right. Oh, Helmut Marko is right, which I don't want to say again. in that they can't afford, if the car's not good, operationally, they can't.
Where they've always been brilliant.
Yeah.
It's their strength.
They can't afford to slip up because they lost places through their poor pit stops in Bahrain. So he's right on that one. I really like the idea of them, like all senior members holding crunch talks in a room, just sat around a table going, well, it's not my fault. It's your fault. Just like pointing at each other and blaming one another, because I feel like that's how it went down.
And the outcome was it's Adrian Newey's fault.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Brilliant. Let's blame Adrian. He's not here anymore. Yeah. So I think they'll have a stronger weekend. I don't think they're going to be, the Red Bull's going to be a match for the McLarens, or I don't think the Mercedes, and potentially not the Ferrari. However, I think Verstappen might be able to make the difference here and get in the mix again. And like you said, Sam, probably hopefully have Tsunoda. If he's at the back of that pack, that's still okay, I think, given where the car is. So it's not the end of the world, but they can't afford for it to be like Bahrain again, because that was terrible.
Yeah, I think Red Bull should be moderately concerned, because you're right, Sam, it could be an outlier. It's not like they've had any other weekend where it's been as bad as what Bahrain was. And we'll wait to see what Saudi Arabia offers. But they should be worried about, certainly for this season, like the Constructors' Championship. I know at this point in time, it's difficult to foresee anyone other than McLaren winning the Constructors, but we were also in this spot last year with Red Bull. But seriously, can either of you picture Red Bull winning the Constructors?
No.
Because I cannot get there. Verstappen winning the Drivers' Championship, I can still see it happening. If that Red Bull improves even a little bit, he could well be in that fight. The Constructors, I cannot see a future where that becomes true. Because whilst Verstappen and another driver in the car can work, it only works when the car is as dominant as it was in 2023. And we saw what happened in 2024 when that car isn't dominant for a full year. They don't win the Constructors. And this year so far, we're basically getting the same story, where without the good start. So I just can't see how they're going to, it should be the target for them, but I can't see how they turn this around.
No, I'm in complete agreement with you. They struggled in 21. Couldn't get the job done. They struggled in 24, couldn't get the job done. 22, Ferrari had an absolute howler, which meant that they basically got away with it. 23 was one of the most dominant cars we've ever seen in Formula One. They have not and will not, in my opinion, win a Constructors' title again while they have this second seat issue with that car.
Relating to Verstappen, Harry, Helmut Marko said it was a great concern after the race that they could lose Verstappen. Is he overplaying that, or is that a legitimate concern?
I think it will be a legitimate concern, given that, goodness me, where do they go if they lose Max Verstappen? Because
what is that team?
What
if he's not there?
Yeah, what are they doing? So I think that will all be at the back of their minds. I think the thing is, I'm not sure. It's a legitimate concern. I'm not sure it's a legitimate concern for next year. It might well be one for a couple of years' time. I just don't see him jumping ship immediately into 2026 and where that would be. So I'm sure they're worried about it. I think this is probably a bit of scaremongering by Helmut Marko, which is unusual because he's such a
kind and helpful man.
Honest chap most of the time. But I can see his tactic here. I think he's trying to say, like, look, we can't afford to keep doing this, because if they keep doing Bahrain, he will go. He will not put up for that. So I see what he's saying here. I see his point. But I don't think quite the situation's as grave as that. I mean, he won the race before this, so like let's pare it back a little bit here, guys.
Oh, really?
Reel in. I don't think it's as disastrous as he's trying to make out with that statement, but again, I can see why he's saying that.
I feel like they need to, even if it's not a great risk, act as if it is, because as I mentioned, like Verstappen, without him in that seat, what is that team? That I'll answer my own question. What is that team? that team is maybe last in the Constructors' Championship. And that sounds incredibly dramatic. But if you had the second seat of Red Bull twice over, they would be on 4 points. So it's not that dramatic. Like,
Stake will be beating them in the car that kills their drivers.
Exactly.
Kick an Alpine in front of you. Could you imagine?
Yes, that's the problem. I could imagine.
It's genuinely realistic.
Yeah. And Verstappen, look, even if you think the second driver hasn't performed to the level that they should have done, Verstappen is still flattering that car. Like the win in Japan, the runner-up in Australia, like he is flattering where that car should be. And I think Red Bull are a little bit fortunate that there isn't an obvious landing place for him next year. Because if one of those teams, let's say McLaren had an opening or Ferrari had an opening, then it becomes much more scary. As it happens, McLaren have got their lineup sewn up. Same with Ferrari. Mercedes look like they're pretty secure with Russell and Antonelli having a good start. And then I know Aston Martin is a bit of a longer term aspiration. If Aston Martin were even at the same competitiveness as they were at the beginning of last season, I think that starts to become more of a question, because if you think this time last year, Aston Martin were not far off Mercedes in the battle for fourth. Obviously, they've fallen well off of that now, which means that even if long-term Verstappen's still thinking of that as a potential move, I don't know if it's for next year. So it's believed as well that Verstappen does have some sort of clause in his contract that...
is it third place if he falls out the top 3?
Yeah, it's some sort of clause about if the car's not good enough to win, he can walk before his contract is due up in, is it the end of 28?
Yeah. There's another rumor going around that he's apparently being scouted by Ferrari to be Lewis Hamilton's replacement when that contract ends.
I think it'll go to Fizzy.
He's too busy fighting clean air.
Deservedly so, actually.
In the boxing ring. I just can't get a jabbing.
Do you think they risk losing Verstappen as early as next year, Sam? Or is it just, if this is one bad race, he'll be back to something close to what he's been at this race and we can put this to bed?
It feels dramatic. I'm not going to lie. It does feel dramatic. It feels like Helmut Marko is trying to use scare tactics to ensure that Red Bull sort itself out. We know politically, internally at Red Bull, there's a lot of conflict going on. There's camps in there where people disagree with others, where people want people out, where people like getting along with how people work. It's not a happy place to be at Red Bull. And I'm sure Max Verstappen is a very sensible guy, and I don't think he does anything rushed. He is going to start to pick his way through this and work out how his future looks, because he's a sensible chap and he doesn't make these bold and dramatic moves unless they're on the racetrack, of course. He will not be, in my opinion, jumping to an Aston Martin in 2026 or jumping to a Mercedes in 2026. He will know that Red Bull will give him at least somewhat of a reasonable car for the first year of the new regulations. He'll want to see how Ford do. He'll want to see how it all changes now that a lot of the key personnel have done. And I'm sure that whatever contract many other teams have open, if Max Verstappen walks up and goes, "Hey, you're who I want to be with," they'll go, "Yes, Mr. Verstappen. Come on in, Mr. Verstappen. You over there. Get out of here." Kick him out the door immediately. I think that's a walking wherever he wants to go, you know. So he hasn't got to rush anything. All the power is in Max Verstappen's hands. No one has more control over what goes on than Max Verstappen right now. But I don't think Red Bull should be absolutely panicking. They've done pretty well over the last few years. They just need to put themselves into some steady ground, build out a plan, get your foundations in order again. You've had a lot of change. I think you'll be all right for now.
Okay. Well, it is now time, as I see Harry Eade gravitating towards the soundboard, for bold predictions.
He was so ready for that, folks.
Gather around, little children, and listen to my song about my F1 bold predictions and how they'll all be wrong.
Harry, mate, we need a point. We're down. Sam managed to get the first one right of the year last time out for Alpine scoring points. Harry, what have you got to bounce back here?
Fernando Alonso's going to score a point or more.
Sure.
It's his first of the season.
Yeah.
You don't fancy his teammate Lance Stroll at Jeddah?
What happened last time?
I crash. Can you move the car? No, I'm in the wall.
I'm in the wall. I literally just took Fernando Alonso out of my fantasy as well. So it will happen.
I took Gasly out of mine last week, so that's how it works.
Okay.
All right. I've got a double Potter.
No,
two-party Racing Bulls. First part, double Q3.
Okay.
Second part, Hadjar is somewhere inside the top 8 in the Grand Prix itself.
Okay, well, Liam Lawson exists, so that's fine. Everyone stay calm. We're all good.
Yeah, this is the week. This is the week, Liam. It better be the week, Liam.
Be the week.
You are building on your point from last week with...
We saw a strong performance from McLaren last time out, but we haven't seen a 25-second plus victory in some time. So the winner will be at least 25 seconds clear of second place. That's right. Even if Piastri or Norris is winning and the other one is second, they will be 25-second plus clear.
Pretty bold. So we've got one concerning McLaren, one concerning Racing Bulls, and one concerning Fernando Alonso. Pole 1, 2, 3. Harry, what have you got?
Pole, I'm going for Oscar Piastri. The win, I'm going to go for Oscar Piastri. Norris will be second and Russell third.
Very similar for me, except I think Norris bounces back. I've got pole for Norris, win for Norris, second for Piastri, third for Russell. Sam?
Pole for Norris, win for Piastri, Verstappen second, Norris third.
All righty. As always, let us know what your bold prediction is and let us know what your pole 1, 2, 3 is. See how it compares to ours.